or good morning, or good evening, ladies and gentlemen, depending on where and when you are watching this interview. My name is Keelin McNamara, and yet again, I am incredibly lucky to be joined by really royalty from the world of mixed martial arts. Today, I am joined by the baddest man in the One Championship roster, heavyweight champion, Mr. Arjan Bhullar. Arjan, thank you so much for your time. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for having me and great to be here.
Thank you so much, and not a problem whatsoever. It's so great to have you here. So, Arjun, my first question for you is this. Obviously, I want to take it back to the beginning and sort of work through your life and career chronologically, if I may. Being born and
Absolutely.
raised in Canada, obviously based on where you grew up, you came from a nation that's really endowed with mixed martial arts royalty. I mean, the names roll off the tongue, but to name just a few, Patrick Cote, Rory McDonald, George St. Pierre, Carlos Newton, really the cream of the crop of mixed martial arts. Did you ever look up or find yourself inspired by any particular fighter who came from your native land?
Not so much because it was about wrestling, Olympic wrestling. That's what the dream was, and that's what the life was about until I got to my early to mid 20s. Um, there were individuals that I like to watch. You know, first and foremost, Fedor, big, huge fan of him. Um, Still am. And so if there's ever a name, it's that one. Undersized heavyweight, many different ways he's won and beat the best of the best, and never had a positive doping test. So I'm hopeful he was clean, and it makes me happy when I watch Fedor fight.
That's an amazing answer. And Fedor has been cited as a big inspiration to many undersized heavyweights. So that is for sure right there. It actually kind of led into my follow-up question, which you've kind of answered very well already. Were there any aspects of your fight game that you modeled off or drew inspiration from another fighter? I would guess Fedor having similar physical characteristics would be one of them.
Sure, but he was more of a gunslinger than I am. So when it came to my actual career, like I was a fan of his, but I've modeled my stuff more to the likes of Daniel Cormier, same guy, undersized, same team, captain, same background. Cain Velasquez, same deal. These guys being in the training room with them, I was able to see firsthand how they develop and model myself more after them.
Absolutely. My next question is obviously you've already alluded to it. By far, the biggest and most successful and to a degree feared aspect of your game is, of course, your elite level wrestling. I mean, your accolades are as long as they are distinguished in that realm. You have a Commonwealth medal, you've represented Canada at the Olympics. It really is a very impressive resume. From your own end, was there any particular reason that you chose to develop your game from the ground up as opposed to the feet down? Was that just your background, or was it just something that you enjoyed in particular?
Yeah, it's just something that I do. Actually, to be honest, what I enjoy the most is the boxing. It's brand new. I watched boxing my whole life, and grew up idolizing Muhammad Ali, studying his stuff. And then in the '90s, Evander Holyfield, Mike Tyson, Lennox Lewis, these guys were huge. So boxing is what I truly enjoy. I'm good at the grappling, but I've done it my whole life. Boxing was new and exciting, and it still is.
That's very interesting. I actually looked up a lot to those guys as well growing up, the Holyfields, the Tysons, and the Lewises. So that is great. Moving into your sort of the beginning of being a young professional mixed martial arts fighter, I I was obviously doing a bit of work into your background and into your first few opponents. And in your first six bouts prior to signing with the UFC, your opponents collectively held a combined record of 21 and 10, which is, of course, extremely impressive for any fighter, let alone someone just starting out. Was it important to you to test yourself early on against the best opponents you could find, or was that more of a happy accident, like a happy coincidence? Was there any reasoning behind that?
Yeah, both. It was tough for us to get fights. First of all, um, I had to take an amateur fight because I couldn't find a pro that could really wanted to take a fight with us. So I even have one amateur somewhere in there. But then we went straight pro, and yeah, we wanted to test ourselves and develop the right way. So we saw a little bit of everything. I fought orthodox, I fought southpaw, I fought 3 rounds, I fought 5 rounds, I fought a jiu-jitsu guy, I fought a wrestler, I fought a brawler. So I saw a little bit of everything in those 6 fights, and we picked them accordingly, stylistically that way. And in terms of the record and their success, yeah, we needed to see that. We don't want softballs before we get to the big leagues, because then you don't know where you're really at. So it was one of those things that we planned for.
That is perfect, and I do agree with you. Even as a as more of a fan more than a journalist, I find growing up the very best fighters were the fighters that tested themselves early on and molded their game around that. So thank you very much for sharing that. That's great to know. So I'll segue into your time in the UFC, if I may. In the UFC, obviously you came up 6-0 as a young professional, and you received your first professional loss against Adam Vichurek. When you were dealt that loss, how did that adversity affect you? And I suppose my knock on from that is, in a way, did it almost help you develop more as a fighter than some of the wins did, having to deal with a different aspect of the fight game?
Yes and no. It was one of those things I wanted to have the O. That's something that was special to me. But no, because it's something I did learn from, but I learned from every fight. It's not like I don't. But that was just a reminder of an old lesson that I've learned already, but I had slipped on, and it was a mental lapse. It wasn't a skill thing. If if you watch that fight, I was winning every second of the fight, and I was very comfortable. I was cruising, but it was a mental lapse. I lost respect for what was in front of me. I lost focus, and he was able to capitalize. So it's mental things, and I just tightened it up after that. Again, it was a good reminder. I wish I didn't have to relearn, but sometimes in life you relearn things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I actually did watch that fight back, and everything you've said is absolutely true. It was just a second lapse, and then I think you were caught in an omoplata, which is, of course, a very difficult submission to get out of anyway. So there's certainly no shame in it. But to hear that answer from a professional is a very good thing, especially. Sort of sticking with your time in the UFC, you actually held a very impressive record for a heavyweight. Obviously, heavyweight's one of those divisions where it literally only takes one punch to change the course of a fight, more so than any of the lighter divisions. And in the UFC, you held a 3-1 record, which is more than exemplary. Yet, when your contract expired, the UFC allowed you to leave at the end of that. Did that sort of surprise you in any way? Was it any of your input? Was it your decision? Was it a mutual decision? Was there any reasoning behind that?
Yeah, they didn't allow me to leave. I chose to leave. I was a free agent. I chose to go free, and then test the marketplace and my value. And my value is significantly more than they were setting it at. They offered me a standard contract that they would anyone else that's a free agent to re-sign. But I got a great offer from one, and huge value, and that's why my life is where it is.
That's very intriguing, because I always wondered what the reasoning was. And you obviously hear all the theories bounced about, but thank you so much for clarifying that. I do appreciate it. Just a very quick sort of spin-off from the UFC stuff before we move on to where you are now. Obviously it's a path very well traveled by a lot of fighters, going into the UFC first and then spinning off. Even though your record was very impressive, do you think you were almost ahead of your time, and perhaps you were underappreciated for the type of heavyweight we see now? Do you think that was perhaps a reasoning for why they didn't value you as highly as obviously you valued you?
Um, Two things. They never value anybody else more than the individual. No one's going to value me better than I am. So that's not a knock on them. That's just the way of life. Um, Number one. Number two, they didn't value India and the Indian marketplace. And that's all. They valued me. That's why they wanted to re-sign me. But it was a standard contract. But I felt that was special, and I had brought something special to the table. But they didn't make that a priority market. They made clear that they were valuing the Middle East and Russia and those markets, and they didn't value the 1 billion strong army. So it is what it is, and that's what it is.
I'm from a country of 5.5 million, so your argument's totally valid. I think you outnumber us about 150 to 1. So
Yeah.
you're absolutely correct. So obviously you've touched on it there now. Obviously your home currently one championship based in Singapore. As we know, in July 2019, we saw you move to one championship. And it's a point that I very briefly touched on a second ago. We've seen a lot of fighters take the path that you took in leaving the UFC to go to one championship. I mean, we've seen fighters like Demetrius Johnson, Eddie Alvarez, etc., and they've taken the same path, but they've suffered much more mixed fortunes than you have when they've made that transition. What is it about the one path that made you decide it was for you? Because obviously I remember whenever you decided to leave the UFC and you were linked with everywhere. You were linked with Bellator, obviously you were linked with one. I think you were linked with the PFL as well at one point. What was it particularly about one championship that appealed to you the most?
Obviously the Indian market it was a priority market for them. So, and my plans on a personal level aligned perfectly with that. That set them apart from Bellator and PFL and the UFC. So that was the big one. And because of that, they valued me and I valued them, and it was a perfect relationship. And just from the top down, Chatri on down, the leadership, they value the Asian values that I was raised with. That's again something PFL and Bellator and UFC and the ones in the West don't have. So a lot of this stuff just lined up, and that was match made in heaven.
Absolutely, great answer. And it's something we've actually heard a lot about. One, they're obviously because their owners are Asian based, they have an incredibly respectful attitude towards fighters from all different cultures and different parts of the planet. So to hear that reaffirmed is very interesting from our end as well. Obviously in May of this year, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about now. You made real history by becoming the first ever fighter of Indian descent to win a major mixed martial arts world title. Obviously, this is when you defeated Brandon Vera to become the one heavyweight world champion. Just sort of touching on that, what did making that sort of history, what kind of impact did that have on you? And obviously, we know you're an incredibly proud man. You carry your descent and your nations with pride. To be that sort of flag bearer to the world for your people of descent and your people in Canada, what does that flag bearer role feel like to you?
It's something that I've always carried. When I walked up to the Olympics, I did the same thing. On every platform I've been given, that's something I represent. UFC fights. It's a great responsibility. It's a great source of pride, and it's something that motivates me and fuels me, and it is who I am. So, and to be able to do that, one for myself, to be a world champion, and two, be the first for my community and represent that against Brandon Vera, it's something that'll be there forever and ever in the history books, and that's a part of my legacy. And legacy is the most important thing to me.
Most definitely. I know that is a big thing for a lot of fighters. Absolutely. My next question is, and this sort of comes back on a level to me. Yesterday, I know you'll probably have a different perspective on this, gentleman. I had the pleasure of talking to Mr. Reinier De Ridder, obviously the current middleweight and light heavyweight champion holder of one championship. I asked him obviously about fighting you because that's one of the biggest stories coming out of one championship right now, the sort of potential super fight. When I asked him about the possibility of facing you, he seemed very interested in facing you for your belt, and he was very interesting in how he broke down how he would see the fight happening. I suppose this is sort of a two-part question from my end. First of all, is this a fight that you would like to have happen? And secondly, how would you see that fight happening against Renier?
How did he break it down? How does he see it happen?
I'll let's just say he was confident in his own ability. He was actually very complimentary of your skills. He said you were very solid on your feet. He said your boxing was very good, but he was confident in his ground game as well. Obviously, he is a jiu-jitsu master, so his confidence largely stemmed from that end. How do you feel you would do?
I think, first of all, I call the shots on that. I'm the A side. He knows that. The company knows that. So, he's been mentioning my name to try to get some of that shine for sure. And I don't like giving it to people because I never did that on my way up. So earn your way. Don't just try to mention my name in interviews and think you're gonna get a crack at me that way. I call the shots, and maybe we do it at light heavyweight. Why would I give him a chance to come up and get some rub? I'll go down on building my own legacy rather than coming up. There's that. Number two, he's got to defend. That's the main thing. Again, you want to be special. You want to stand out for me. Make a name for yourself. Defend your titles, and get some momentum, and we'll make it work. Number three, yeah, he's good in jiu-jitsu. That's one aspect. This isn't a jiu-jitsu match. So there's an MMA fight. So let's start with that. And even say he is, amazing in jiu-jitsu. The biggest holes in jiu-jitsu are what? Taking someone down. You're not going to take me down with those garbage takedowns. Number two hole in jiu-jitsu is keeping someone down. You're not about to keep me down either. So this isn't where I'm going to play guard off my back and he's going to do the same and there's going to be gentleman's agreement. I'm going to also punch him in the face. This isn't jiu-jitsu. So it changes everything. So if he's relying on one martial art in a mixed martial arts fight, there's many different ways to victory. And I would tell him to stay busy in the gym rather than focusing on beating me in a jiu-jitsu match.
It's actually very interesting you mentioned that, Arjan, because another part of my interview with Reinier as well was he did mention you could be the one fighter to draw out his kickboxing that he's been developing and that he's been working on in his gym. How do you feel about that?
I will say my jiu-jitsu is better than his kickboxing. So if he's going to do that, then maybe he's the guy that draws out my jiu-jitsu. I don't know. Yeah, his stand-up has been shown in his other fights, and it's terrible. Let's not get it twisted. And yeah, so that's fine. If I'm drawing out his kickboxing and he thinks that's going to hold up, good luck to him.
That's a very interesting perspective. I really have to say it is. And to be clear, you're willing to go down to light heavyweight to fight him as well? This isn't definitively at heavyweight.
I'm the A side. If that's what we decide to do, we will do that. If we decide to do it at heavyweight, we will do that. It's whatever we want. But getting another belt at a different weight is something that interests me, that intrigues me. It builds on my legacy rather than just defending my belt over and over.
That's very, very interesting. Honestly, I'd never even considered that. I mean, that's on me. I probably should have, but thank you for telling me that. I never figured that could be the case. So Arjan, my last question for you, and it's a question that I ask everybody, and it's a question I asked Reinier yesterday as well. When eventually, say, the next 5 to 10 years or so, or however fortunate enough your career is able to go on, when you eventually retire, how would you like to be remembered? What is the legacy of Arjan Bhullar?
My legacy, big piece of it's in place now, and then just a world-class mixed martial artist, called his own shots, was put his value before anybody or anything else, had the self-respect and the foresight to do that. Yeah, just a lot of those things. And then, the people I beat along the way, the special things I was able to do. We got some big things in the works right now. You'll see what I mean by that. Stuff no one's even doing in the sport anywhere in the world, any organization. That's going to be huge. And yeah, and then what I was able to do for other people, making the path a little easier for the next guys to come up through.
Yeah, and I'm sure the next generation will massively appreciate that for sure. We've seen so many fighters say how difficult it is to come up. So if that is the case, that will certainly be a lasting legacy. Actually, if I may, I do promise you this is my last question. It just came to me there now. If let's say your next 2-3 fights they're with Reinier or whoever they're with, if the UFC came back to you with the right offer, with the market opportunity, and with the value that clearly you are at and that you see yourself at, could they tempt you back into their heavyweight ranks? Would a potential super fight with someone like Francis Ngannou be enough to bring you back?
The one that gets me excited is Stipe Miocic.
Love that.
Him and John Jones. after that, just because the history with DC and AKA and me being part of those camps. Obviously, I'm a competitor. Francis would be right there too. But on a personal note, on having fuel already in the tank for more than just a rivalry or a competition, it would be that. Those are a little more personal to me because of how it went with DC.
And of course, they're both world-class wrestlers as well. Obviously, that is Stipe's game. That is the beating heart of it, his elite wrestling. John, of course, is a much more complex situation because he can bring a little bit of everything. I know, obviously, in this game, you have to fully believe in yourself, and you fully vindicated your belief in yourself with what you've already achieved. If you were to fight Stipe and you were to fight John Jones, how do you see both those fights going? What do you bring that gives you the edge over both of those guys?
I just think, with Stipe, I believe my wrestling is better than his, and I believe my boxing is better than his. And those are his two biggest assets. I think he's got a lot more mileage on him. And I would be able to wear on him and just and beat him in all those aspects. I've been a part of DC's camps. I know that, he knows that, the team knows that. I'd love to do that for him and for the team, get that one back for us. And John Jones, very similar. I think he's not the same old John Jones since his picograms started disappearing on him. And that's another one I'd like to get back. I think DC was winning their second fight before he got caught with that kick. And that's another person. He's not a good human being. And sometimes that doesn't matter in life, but sometimes the good guys win as well. And I'd like to be able to beat him and right the world.
Well, I mean, I respect that perspective a lot. It's actually a very unique one. I've never heard anybody say that before. So thank you for giving me that for sure. As I said, that those are all the questions that I have. And thank you so much for your answers to them as well, Arjan. I appreciate it a great deal.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it, brother.
Not at all, brother. So ladies and gentlemen, that is it from me. All the questions you've heard from the man himself, the baddest man in one championship, the pound for pound, one of the greatest pound for pound fighters on the planet right now, Mr. Arjan Bhullar. Arjan, I cannot thank you enough. I really appreciate your time today, brother.
Thank you so much.
Make sure to subscribe to the LowKick MMA YouTube channel for all the latest news, event previews, and interviews with some of the biggest stars in MMA.